Hello guys and welcome back. Today we are building and painting the Bf109 E3 from Airfix in 1:48 scale. It has been quite some time since my last plane build, but this one looked like a fun and rather quick project. As with most aircraft kits, we must start with the cockpit. The level of detail of the cockpit can vary greatly. Some kits are almost empty, with just a seat and suggested controls, while in other kits the cockpit is almost a complete model in itself. I don't have enough experience with airplanes for such sets from Eduard, for example, but the Airfix kits offer a very nice middle ground with enough details without having to sit for hours at the cockpit. Nevertheless, one day I would like to try a more complicated kit, like Eduard's for example. A big flaw in this kit are the ejector pin marks. They are located right on the side panels of the cockpit between the other details. I can only try to reduce them carefully with sandpaper, but it will be difficult to remove them completely. Fortunately, they were partially covered by the following details. And now I already have to start painting the cockpit. The base color is RLM 02 1941 variant from AK Interactive. The instructions were not really clear about the color, and Airfix does not use the RLM color codes. But if you look up various other kits, RLM 02 should be the correct one. If I've made a mistake, please correct me in the comments. As I said, airplanes are not something I usually build. Small parts like the seat are easier to paint if you stick them to a toothpick with some poster tack. I painted the control panel black. For the details, I switched back to the brush. And the instructions for the instruments on the sides only provided partially reliable information about the color, so I apologize if what I'm painting here is completely wrong. In the end, I'm really just trying to create a bit of color contrast and make the few details stand out better. In this kit, the seat belts are molded onto the seats. Some kits have none, others have decals or photo etched parts. In this case, I only have to carefully paint the raised areas. Now I can put the individual parts together. Since some of the contact points are already painted, I can't use plastic glue and have to use super glue. I sprayed the control panel with a layer of glossy clear varnish for the decals. The decals have a nice level of detail and should be pretty easy to apply. To prepare the surface, I applied some microset to the control panel. Then I can just slide the decals in the right position. Once the decals are in place, I coat them with microsol. This helps to break the carrier film and allows the decals to conform to the surface. And to give the cockpit the finishing touch, I apply a black panel liner. This highlights the details even better. I did not use a protective layer of clear varnish here, because I only used this effect and no others. With a silver weathering pencil, I can show a bit of wear and tear on the floor. The visor of the Bf109 is made of a clear part. Here I can only paint the lower part black and have to leave the upper glass transparent. I have already attached it to the first half of the fuselage. I think it actually looks pretty good for what the kit has provided. Now I have to attach the second half. The fit is mediocre, but not bad. Small gaps can easily be filled with Tamiya extra thin cement and then held together with clamps. The larger gaps, directly in front and behind of the cockpit, are a bit more complicated, however. I carefully filled the gap with superglue. After this had enough time to harden completely, I can sand the excess glue flush with the rest of the fuselage. After priming, I may have to revisit some parts to sand them down again. The two small caliber guns are placed on the top of the nose. When the nose is added, it may be possible to see the blank engine inside through these two holes. To avoid this, I will paint the inside, which could be visible, black. Looking into the wheel well, we again see huge ejector pin marks in the only place that will be visible. I really have no idea if this has a manufacturing reason, but it is really annoying. I try to remove them as best as possible with a scraper and sandpaper, but there are still some residues visible on both sides of the finished model, which is a real shame. In contrast, the fit of both wings was excellent. The guide pins fit perfect. The pressure of the clamps presses the soft plastic together tightly and closes all gaps. After that, all that is left to do is sand down the pressed out plastic. Attaching the fuselage to the wings is also very easy, as both parts fit together almost perfectly. The Bf109 has a radiator attached under each wing. I painted the insides black beforehand to simulate shadows. Next, I need to attach the vertical and horizontal stabilizers to the back. The elevation of the horizontal stabilizers cannot be changed, but the rudder could technically be moved to a different position. The flaps can be put in different positions too. If you leave those pins attached like I did, the flaps will be at the bottom. If you want to show them raised, you have to cut the pins off, but I prefer to have them in their lowered position in this kit. The ailerons can also be mounted at different angles. I chose to show them raised all the way up, as they would be when the plane is on the ground. The E variant of the Bf109 featured 20mm MG/FF cannons in each wing. I masked off the canopy with masking tape and liquid mask for the more difficult shapes. That way I can attach it right now before painting. I kept both the landing gear and propeller separate from the main body for now. This will make painting and handling the model easier without the risk of breaking anything. And that's the construction done. Let's continue with painting. I start with a layer of light grey primer from Vallejo. After applying the first layer, I check the model for gaps or scratches, which I then remove with sandpaper. I try to do some pre-shading with black here. While the pre-shading itself worked, the later layers of paint were too opaque and you could hardly see the pre-shading. It only worked better on the underside and the nose, as both those areas were in lighter colors. And speaking about the underside, here I continue with a layer of RLM 65 1941 edition from AK Interactive. I also paint the area under the cockpit and the rear part of the fuselage with the same color. Next up are the wings. I taped off the fuselage to avoid overspray. The basis for this camouflage pattern is the standard splinter camouflage made with RLM02 and RLM71. I begin by applying RLM71 to both wings and horizontal stabilizers. The instructions contain a pretty big error here. The numbers for the color RLM02 and RLM71 are swapped. So I thought I would apply the lighter color here, while in reality it is the darker one, but more on that in a moment. Once the paint had dried, I added the masking for the splinter pattern. And at that exact moment I realized the instructions had the colors flipped. The numbers 240 and 242 should be flipped, as 240 is actually the lighter RLM02 and 242 is the darker RLM71. And that also means my masking is flipped as well, and I have to redo everything and flip it around. At least it did not take that long, as the pattern is pretty simple, but it's still annoying. Now I can apply the lighter color. And here at least the high opacity was great, because sometimes spraying a lighter color over a darker one may need a lot more layers. I'm sorry if you wanted to see me removing the masking tape, I forgot to film it. But the splinter camouflage turned out great. The next color is RLM04 yellow for both the nose and the rudder. The already painted areas were masked accordingly. And now we have arrived at the difficult part of the camo, the modeling. I never attempted a camo like this, and to be quite honest, I rarely even do more detailed work with the airbrush in general. But practice makes perfect. Since these types of camouflage were applied individually by hand in the field anyway, I can't do too much wrong here, I think. Right under the cockpit, the pattern is really dense and almost completely green. So here is a great place to start and try out small dots and lines, as I can just go over the lines I don't like again and again. this modeling pattern continues to the tail, but becomes a lot less dense the further you go back. In order to not accidentally make too many large spots, I apply the paint very lightly and paint each spot several times to ensure sufficient opacity. It may sound contradictory, but I think a difficult but random pattern like this is usually a really good one to start improving your airbrush skills. And this is the modeling finished. There's definitely room for improvement, but for my first attempt I'm satisfied. But what do you think? And have you ever tried a pattern like this? Let me know in the comments. The pattern on the wings should be much easier now. I simply traced it onto a piece of paper and cut it out accordingly. Then I attached it loosely with poster tack. This should give me clear shapes with fairly soft edges when sprayed from above. Here I have to use the same color as the bottom, RLM 65 light blue. It is very important to try not to change the angle when spraying or to change it only slightly, as the mask does not lie directly on the wings. The layers must also be very thin and accumulations of paint must be avoided at all costs, as otherwise they will quickly run under the mask. Once the paint had some time to dry, I can carefully remove the mask and hope everything went as planned. And I would say the result is quite impressive. Considering all I used was a simple piece of printer paper with holes in it, this method is definitely recommended. With the painting part done, I can save my progress with a coat of clear varnish. Choosing a gloss varnish instead of a matte one here is important, because the next up are a plethora of decals. These are a lot easier to apply over a gloss surface and they help to prevent silvering. And while I'll apply those decals, let me tell you about the tools I use and why. First, the obvious one, water. Of course, it goes without saying why water decals need water to work. For larger decals, I can recommend using slightly warmer water so that the whole process goes faster. And of course, remember to make sure that all the decals fit into the water container. With very large decals, for example foil-covered airplanes, this can be a bit tricky and you may need to experiment for a bit. Next, I use a two-part decal softener. The first part is microset. I apply this liquid to the part of the model where I want to place the decals later. Microset's main advantage is its improved adhesive strength. And microset can also be used for the complete opposite, namely to remove the decals. However, this only works as long as there is no clear coat to cover them. To apply the decals to the model, I use various tweezers, brushes, or for larger ones simply my finger. However, you should be careful when working with tweezers, as pointed ones in particular can quickly tear thin decals. And to make positioning easier, I recommend keeping the area moist with either water or microset. and once the decals are in the right position, I can remove the excess water with a cotton swab. Now I am applying a layer of microsole, the second part of the decal softener. Microsole is great because it dissolves the carrier film the decals sit on. That allows the decals to conform perfectly to the surface they are sitting on. And here we have the plane with all its decals in place. Now is also a good time to attach the landing gear and propeller with superglue. And now, after a long time, did the masks on the canopy work or did they fail? The masking tape is very easy to remove and the parts underneath look very good. The liquid mask, on the other hand, is a bit more stubborn because the layers of paint here have become quite thick. The result is okay. Unfortunately, some areas are a bit scratched, but that's nothing that a little gloss varnish can't fix. Next time I will probably try to do everything with masking tape and avoid using liquid mask. The final step for this kit is a quick and simple dark wash around the details and in the panel lines. I want to keep the weathering to a minimum because I both like the plane in a clean state and this plane has been sitting on my workbench way too long and I want it to be done. All I have to do is let the wash flow around and into the details. Then I let everything dry for a few minutes. With a cotton swab and a little white spirit, I can then wipe off any excess. To do this, I work in the direction of flight to create a slight streaking effect at the same time. In some areas I may need to redo this step a few times until I am satisfied with the result. And that's it for this project. Let's take a look at the final result. For my first airplane model in over a year, I'm really happy with the result. Airplanes have different difficulties and priorities than tanks, but it's precisely this variety that I like about the hobby. I made this and probably the following kit during the peak of my renovations and subsequent move. During this time the uploads will continue to be irregular and I apologize for that. But once I'm done, I will have even more opportunities to live out this hobby to the fullest and share it with you. Stay tuned for everything that I have planned. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe if you don't want to miss any future uploads. Leave your feedback and suggestions down in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you next time.